Welcome back to part 2 of the Knut story. I am going to reread this page just to help remind us where we are. Remember, Knut has been born at the Zoo of Berlin, and he is very, very popular with both German residents as well as internationally. So, Thomas's favorite times with Knut happen away from the crowds. Every morning before the zoo opens, Thomas leads Knut on a walk through the zoo grounds. It was during these early morning walks that Thomas gave Knut his first swimming lessons. Knut already enjoyed wading in shallow water, but when Thomas dove into deep water and called to Knut to follow him, Knut hesitated. That means he was a little nervous, so he paused. Thomas patiently encouraged him until Knut finally jumped in. Before long, Knut was swimming around in polar bear fashion, paddling with his front legs and using his back legs to steer. Just as a bear mother would, Thomas makes sure that Knut's boisterous energy doesn't get out of hand. If Knut grows impatient before a feeding and starts to nip, Thomas will warn him, "Nein, nein, no, no," until Knut stops. Usually, Knut listens well. When Thomas calls Knut, "Come," Knut always comes running. When Knut misbehaves, Thomas gently but firmly corrects him. All polar bears love water, but they need an adult to teach them how to swim. Every day, Knut is growing bigger and stronger. By the time Knut is a year old, he will be so big that he could hurt Thomas without meaning to. It might not be safe for them to play. Thomas and Knut will be together as long as they can, and no matter what, Thomas will stay closely involved in Knut's care until Knut is ready to be independent. Adult polar bears spend most of their time alone, so Knut won't be lonely if it happens that Thomas can no longer be with him every day. And Knut will always be very special to Thomas. Knut will play with anything. So here he's got a sneaker, here he's got a basket. Knut's favorite place to be is close to Thomas. And that's how they would be in the wild as well. As adults, they are alone, but as babies, they stay with their parents. And so their parents will train them to do things like swim, for example. And that's the story of Knut, who survived and thrived because of the love and care of his foster father, Thomas, and the support of Zoo Berlin. Knut has brought joy to millions around the world, but more importantly, he has reminded us that one small creature can make a big difference. Knut may be just a tiny polar bear cub, but he inspires us to do everything we can to help polar bears in the wild. Together, we can take small actions that will lead to big change. If we all do our part to help save the polar bear's natural habitat and all natural habitats, we will give Knut's story a very happy ending indeed. So this is some more fun facts about polar bears, which I actually think is really smart because, again, this is a scientific or expository text. So everything in here has been true. Here's more about polar bears, how they look. Polar bears are perfectly built to keep cozy in freezing weather. They have thick fur covering their entire bodies except the tips of their noses and the bottoms of their paws. This yellowish-white coat helps them blend in with the snow and ice around them. Underneath the fur is more protection against the cold, a layer of blubber, or fat, that is 3 to 4 inches thick. Small ears and a short tail also help prevent heat loss. Giant, partly webbed paws are just right for walking across slippery ice or swimming through cold water. Grown-up polar bears are much bigger than baby Knut. Females weigh between 300 and 700 pounds, and males weigh 700 and 1,600 pounds. About 3 times as much as a lion. What they eat. Polar bears like to eat meat, especially fatty meat. They need to consume an average of about 4.5 pounds of fat every day in order to survive. In the wild, their main source of food is seals. Instead of trying to hunt out at sea, they wait patiently at openings in sea ice. These are sheets of ice on top of seawater, because this is where seals come up to breathe. They can smell a seal from 10 football fields away and under 3 feet of ice. Their sense of smell is so good that some people call polar bears noses with legs. Some people call polar bears noses with legs. They use the quotation marks here because that's what people are saying. Family time. Unlike other bears, polar bears do not hibernate. Only new mothers and their babies spend long periods of time in dens. A pregnant female scrapes a tunnel in the snow and makes a dark, quiet chamber where she cuddles up to give birth. A litter typically includes between 1 and 3 cubs, and the mother lives with the cubs in the den for 3 to 5 months. During that time, she does not eat any food, surviving only on her fat reserves. Mothers stay with their cubs for between 1 and 3 years until they are able to hunt for themselves. Where they live. Polar bears make their homes in large open spaces around the Arctic. They roam from Alaska to Russia and from Canada to Greenland. There are no polar bears in the southern hemisphere. The Latin name for polar bears is Ursus maritimus, which means sea bear. So this has Latin roots, but maritim, that means that has roots with water, like marine. So sea bear. It's a name that suits polar bears because they spend so much time in the water. They love to swim. Sometimes they wander off the coast on drifting packs of ice called ice floats. Polar bears spend most of their time on sea ice because it's the best place to hunt seals, which is obviously what they are looking for to eat. The biggest threat to polar bears. Polar bears in the wild do not have natural predators. Most scientists agree that the biggest threat to polar bears is global warming, changing weather caused by gases produced when we do things like drive cars and burn coals. These gases trap sunlight in the Earth's atmosphere, which makes temperatures rise on the surface of the Earth and in the oceans. Studies show that permanent ice in the Arctic has dropped by 9.8%, or 9.8% every year since 1978. Ice is melting in the spring earlier than it used to and freezing later in the fall. This means that polar bears' hunting areas are shrinking and their hunting season is getting shorter. Although nobody knows exactly how many polar bears live in the wild, researchers have counted fewer polar bears and cubs in recent years. As hunting has become more difficult for polar bears, people have also noticed that bears are not as big as they used to be. Experts in Canada found that male bears weigh 150 pounds less now than they did 30 years ago. Some scientists say that if warming trends continue at their current pace, polar bears could be extinct in our lifetime. So this is another text feature of exponential text or informational text. This is a graphic picture, and what this shows is this red line is the sea ice in September of 1979. So that's where the ice used to be. Sea ice in September 2005. That's where our current line is. So within that time, that's how much the polar ice cap has been shrinking. That's why it says the Arctic shrinking sea ice. And one of the things that you will also typically find about exponential text or informational text is that not only will they give you scientific facts about the particular subject that you are looking at, but they will also usually give you tips on how you can help. So things are like planting a tree. You can learn more about this at these websites, things like that. But this is why it's so important to actually keep on or keep up with scientific discoveries and tracking things, because this is how we learn. With that being said, this book was not just published last year. In fact, I'm going to show you where you can find the book's copyright date. I'm not sure if you know this or not, but usually on the page right behind the title page, you will find the book's information. So you'll find things like it's by Turtle Pond Publications, and I know this is really, really small, like really small, but that's how most of them are. You will find like where they're published in the Library of Congress catalog. You will find like their ISBN number. This one, it's a pronunciation guide to German names and terms, which is really relevant since this took place in Germany. However, what I'm paying attention to, this little C, and again, I know this is super, super small, but this little C right here, this is what stands for copyright. And the latest copyright year is this. So this book was written clear back in 2007. So you may be interested in actually seeing if some of the statistics have changed or if there are better ways for us to help. But that doesn't mean that this information in the text isn't valid. It just means that we need to do more research and get the latest research instead of just relying on one piece of information. So now we have read Knut, How One Little Polar Bear Captivated the World. Thanks.